Thank you for listening to this podcast from TRE, Talk Radio Europe, your voice in Spain and around the world. For more information, please visit tre.radio.
Ger Sweeney presents Live on Eire in association with emeraldconnection.net.
TRE.
Talk Radio Europe on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
I was a little premature there, but that's all right. You get the drift. And she closed her microphone, didn't she? Tanya or Sanya closed her microphone and then opened it up again. She was watching the clock as well. Thank you to what's his name? He forgot my name. Howard Brereton. It's Ger Sweeney. Nice to meet you. And thank you very much indeed for looking after us for Spain today for the last hour. Much appreciated. Good to hear you as always. And I hope that you and Luna have yourselves a fabulous evening in Eire this evening. Look forward to hearing from you tomorrow. So it is Live on Eire. It is the Irish programme. I'm with you for the next 2 hours. I hope you can stay with me. I have a lot to bring to you. But let me tell you firstly about the guests that you're going to be meeting on the programme. Two very interesting people. I'm going to be talking to a fella that I know quite well. He works out of Ennis in County Clare. He's from North Clare. His name is Pat Foodie, and he's been selling tyres for the past 50 years. I'm going to be talking to him about tyre safety, because he's embarked on something that I think is absolutely admirable and commendable. And I'll tell you more about it. But we're going to talk tyre safety. And just because he's from Ireland and he's talking about Irish roads and Irish tyres doesn't mean that you can't learn something in Spain or wherever it is that you happen to be listening. So in terms of safety, I think it's smashing. I spoke to him yesterday afternoon, in fact, so you're going to hear the interview this evening. So I know exactly what he's going to be talking about. In the second hour of the programme, I'm going to be talking to Dr. Ger Ramsey, who is the curator of archaeology at the National Museums National Museums Northern Ireland. Alrighty, and I will be talking to him about court tombs. There's a 6,000-year-old court tomb, which was discovered in 1966, and it's after being rehoused at the Ulster Folk Museum. And I'm looking forward to my conversation with Dr. Ger Ramsey about that in the second hour of the programme. I'll have some good Irish music in there as well, and we'll have plenty of news too. If you would like to get in contact, you're more than welcome to do so. Howard didn't forget my name, but remembered quite correctly that I normally am broadcasting in Ireland, but I'm back in Spain for the last couple of weeks, but I'm still working remotely. So I am in Spain and enjoying the beautiful weather. Thankfully, I'm not exposed to Storm Agnes, and we'll talk more about that a little later on, because she is lashing the country at the moment, and as you heard on the news, she's doing a fine job, and she's heading towards the UK in the very near future. So we'll tell you more about that in just a wee while. I want to say what a great weekend we had in sport last weekend. It's Wednesday evening. And it's kind of forgotten about, but I spent 3 days watching the Solheim Cup. Wow. And the rugby was only amazing. Let's talk about the rugby. 13-8 defeat of the reigning Rugby World Cup champion South Africa in Paris on Saturday night had the Irish rugby fans across the globe celebrating over the weekend big time. And I know one or two of them, and they're still celebrating. And why not? Because it was a wonderful match, a wonderful performance by the Irish team. And it has been commended by so many people since the weekend. Now, the retention of the Solheim Cup by Europe on Sunday down the road in Finca Cortesen was another reason to celebrate. And while it was fitting that the Spaniard Carlota Siganda was the heroine as she closed it out on the 17th. Another fabulous campaign by Ireland's Leona Maguire contributed in no small way to Europe's success, having played in all 5 games over the weekend. She was absolutely outstanding. But can I say to you, as the fella says, there wasn't anything between the games, as you saw, because it ended 14-all. They were so evenly matched, and it didn't look that way after the morning games when America were beating Europe 4-0. So well done, and fingers crossed for the European Ryder Cup team this weekend. Shane Lowry and Rory McIlroy, the Irish interests there, but we'll be shouting and roaring for the English and the Scots and the Norwegians, and who else have we got in there? I don't know who else is in there. I'm kind of losing it now. Oh, we have the Spanish. Of course we have with John Ram. And who else? I don't know. Anyway, so listen, look good. A good weekend ahead as well. Now, the biggest story in Ireland, apart from the weather, because look, if the sun is shining, the weather is the topic of conversation because it's too warm. If the rain and the wind is lashing, it's the topic of a conversation because it's too wet and windy. But the big story in Ireland is what happened off the coast of Ireland. Gardaí say that more than 2.2 tonnes of cocaine worth around 157 million euro have been recovered from a bulk carrier ship seized in a military operation off the coast of Cork, making it the largest seizure in the history of the state. The ship, MV Matthew, is being searched and forensically examined in the port of Cork today. The 25 crew members are being interviewed by Gardaí, while 3 people remain in Garda custody. Assistant Commissioner Justin Kelly said that the drugs originated from the South American cocaine cartels. He said a number of organised crime groups in Ireland and in the UK and across Europe with direct links to South America came together to source the drugs. There's no large shipment like this coming into our ports or transiting our country without an Irish criminal group involved, the Assistant Commissioner said. Basically what happened here was that's the mothership with the mother load. And there was a trawler which was purchased, I believe, on Thursday or Friday. Oh no, hang on, where are we? Wednesday. I think it was purchased over the weekend. And 2 men took that trawler to go and meet the mothership and take off whatever they had paid for. But they got stranded on a sandbank and they couldn't go anywhere and they had to be winched. And the authorities were watching this particular container ship anyway. Now, the fleet commander for the Irish Naval Service described the seizure of the boat as an extremely complex military operation. Commander Tony Geraghty said that the impounding of the vessel was made more difficult by the poor weather and trying to predict the actions of the criminal gangs. The Naval Service fired warning shots during the operation, he said, because the merchant ship refused to follow instructions and an escalated use of force was used. The ship is 190 metres long and exceptionally high freeboard. So it would have been very hard to get on board. However, the commander said that had the weather been better, they would have been able to launch a boarding party. Instead, conditions dictated the necessity to call in the Army Ranger Wing, who fast roped onto the ship from a helicopter overhead. Incredible stuff. The Director General of Revenue and Customs Operations said that provisions in the Customs Act 2015 were used for the first time to appoint Defence Forces personnel as customs officers to go on board and secure the vessel. Jerry Harahill said the appointed customs officers can board a vessel at sea, but because of the weather conditions and the movements of the ship, customs were not equipped to board. The ship did not comply, and he said it became obvious that force was required. And under this legislation, the Army Rangers were appointed customs officers in less than an hour and seized the ship. Assistant Commissioner Kelly also described the operation as a significant disruption of criminal groups who would have lost significant money. This is a huge hit for the people involved in this, he said. It sends a message that Ireland isn't an easy place to import drugs into and that we will be relentless and determined to disrupt and dismantle criminal gangs. Taoiseach Leo Varadkar praised the phenomenal work of the agencies involved in the operation. Speaking in the Dáil, Mr. Varadkar said that the seizure may be the biggest interception of illegal drugs in Irish history. Taoiseach Micheál Martin commended the bravery shown by those involved in what was a treacherous and dangerous operation in rough seas. Separately, Michael O'Sullivan, the former Assistant Garda Commissioner and former head of the EU's anti-drug smuggling agency, the Maritime Analysis and Operations Centre, described the Irish Naval Service as the unsung heroes of Europe. Europe is very much dependent on the Irish Naval Service monitoring, tracking vessels and even intercepting vessels. So the more assets that they have available, the better it is all round for everybody. He said drug traffickers figure which route has the least resistance. So if there's not enough naval vessels off the coast of Spain or off the coast of Ireland, they will try manoeuvring through those routes. Chief of Staff of the Irish Defence Forces, Lieutenant General Sean Clancy, commended the courage, discipline and professionalism of all personnel involved in the operation. As I said, that is the biggest news story in Ireland at the moment, and you can see why as well. I think we'll take some music. I think we will. Here's a fabulous duo, Rio McGuinness and Gerard Sands.
My hand was shaking like a feather. Black raven hair and Cinderella. No clever way to know her better. Whoa, whoa, fever. My heavy-hearted señorita. You leave your ego underneath her. Whisper a prayer and have to leave her. Whoa, whoa, all night. Say I love you for the last time. Oh, what a night. Say I want you for the last time. And we'll get higher, higher, shine right through you. Raise my soul just to say I knew you. We'll get higher, higher, drenched in moonlight, wrist and ocean to take that first flight. Collision, I couldn't make it as the villain. I bid it and John Hill beginning. We had to sacrifice the vision. Whoa, whoa, what a night. Say I love you for the last time. Oh, what a night to say I want you for the last time. And we'll get higher, higher, shine right through you. Raise my soul just to say I knew you. We'll get higher, higher, drenched in moonlight, wrist and ocean to take that first flight. What's enough? What's enough? What's enough love? What's enough? What's enough? What's enough love? And we'll get higher, higher, shine right through you. Raise my soul just to say I knew you. We'll get higher, higher, drenched in moonlight, wrist and ocean to take that first flight. Higher, higher, shine right through you. Raise my soul just to say I knew you. We'll get higher, higher, drenched in moonlight, wrist and ocean to take that first flight.
Nice, isn't it? It comes from a duo, as I said, and their names, Rio McGuinness and Gerard Sands. Together, they operate as Dark Tropics, and a song called Carnival. It's brand new from them. Wish them well with it. I'm going to do a very quick break. Come back to me just after that, please. And I have more news and more music for you.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
And you welcome back. Nice to have your company on this Wednesday evening. Sound very loud there for some reason. That's why. A new publicly funded fertility treatment scheme will include the transfer and storage of all embryos arising from one cycle of IVF, the Health Service Executive has confirmed. Clinical Director of the HSE's National Women and Infants Health Programme, Dr. Tingana Murphy, says that a full publicly funded cycle of IVF will comprise of one episode of ovarian stimulation. That's developing the eggs and then transferring any resultant fresh or frozen embryos until such time as all embryos have been used, or the treatment results in a live birth. That means frozen embryos can be used in future attempts, so potentially somebody could get pregnant on the third try of that cycle. Under the new funding model, which commenced on Monday, the state will also pay for embryos to be stored for up to 2 years. Dr. Murphy said that in the event of a couple being successful and having a baby, their frozen embryos may be used by them at their own cost if they want to try for more children in the future. Eligibility criteria for couples includes an age limit of 40 for women and 59 for men. while intending mothers-to-be must have a BMI of no more than 30. Couples who have previously had more than one round of IVF are also excluded. The pathway to fertility treatment for couples starts with a referral from their GP to the HSE Fertility Hub located at various hospitals across the country. If tests and investigations in the hub are not successful, the HSE will then fund further treatment at one of the private fertility clinics nationwide. Free treatment in fertility clinics will not be offered to same-sex couples, single people, or couples using donated eggs or sperm under the new HSE scheme. Minister for Health, Stephen Donnelly, has previously indicated that this is because of assisted human reproduction legislation has yet to be approved in the Oireachtas. Alrighty. Yes, I'm going to tell you about the European Commission, because the Commission has urged Ireland to speed up the switching off of out-of-date copper wire networks for phone and broadband services. The switch off of legacy copper networks is seen as a key step in the rollout of new broadband networks. The communications regulator Comreg published proposed rules around the switch off earlier this year and notified this to the European Commission as required under EU rules. The Commission has published comments on the process, recommending a shorter time frame for the copper switch off. The Commission urges Comreg to refrain from any more delays in the adoption of the framework that could further postpone the copper switch off process in Ireland, according to a letter to Comreg from the European Commission Directorate General and Communications Networks, Content and Technology. The Commission is also questioned a requirement that telecom company Eire bears the entirety of non-standard connection costs and asked Comreg to reassess the proportionality of this measure in light of the objectives of the Electronic Communications Code. A lot of that is double Dutch, but there you go. The director of the National Women's Council of Ireland, Orla O'Connor, has said that it is not a surprise that a proposed referendum to replace the constitutional reference to women's duties in the home has been postponed. On Sunday, Minister for Children, Roderick O'Gorman, said that the referendum would not take place this year. A November referendum had been promised by the government earlier this year, following a recommendation from a citizens' assembly on gender equality. In August, the government said it would not proceed with the gender equality referendum this November until there was agreement on a settled wording. Ms O'Connor said it was very clear once the government did not announce the wording before the Dáil rose before the summer recess that it was very unlikely to be happening this year. She said that she agrees with the minister that the wording absolutely needs to be well thought out, and the council wants to see that wording published as soon as possible. She said if the referendum is early next year, which the council would hope for, then the wording needs to come out within the next few weeks, because it's very important that the public has time to consider the changes and that there is time for a national conversation in terms of what's involved. She said that we've known for a long time that we need to remove Article 41.2, which relates to women's role in the home, and the National Women's Council is very clear, she said. It wants to see that out, but also, and significantly, is the inclusion of the value of care and recognition, recognising the importance of care in our society. She went on to say that the council agreed with the wording of the Citizens' Assembly about recognising care and all its forms inside the home, but also in the wider community. Ms O'Connor explained that it would not be about the inclusion of the word carers in the Constitution, but rather about the value of care in our society. She added that limiting the wording to care in the home would not be okay for the National Women's Council, because it wants to see a broad recognition. So there we go. There's going to be an awful lot about that particular story when the wording is finally agreed. And of course, there is next year you have the European and local elections. So politicians are going to be very distracted. And you're also then, within the next 18 months, there's going to be a general election, which is also going to focus people's minds, and they may not be 100% focused on what they're doing right there. A lady by the name of Rachel May Hannon comes from Monaghan. She's living and working out of Dublin at the moment. She's got a brand new single, and here it is for you today. It's called Infinity.
I don't You never see the trying things I do. I wanna be the honey in your coffee cup, or the tattoo that you never cover up. Tomorrow I don't think that I could hold on. I just wanna get you on your own. I don't make the rules. I now you're in my pool. I don't make the rules. I and now you're in my pool. I Oh, every time we talk I feel there's so many things you should know. You should know how much time you're spending in my mind. In my mind you're living free. Oh, real estate in my memory. Tomorrow I don't think that I could hold on. I just wanna get you on your own. I don't make the rules. Now you're in my pool. I don't make the rules. And now you're in my pool. I-N-F-I-N-I-T-Y, feeling you, so feeling high. Never felt I needed it till you. I-N-F-I-N-I-T-Y, something we cannot deny. Never felt I needed it till you. I just wanna get you on your own. I-N-F-I-N-I-T-Y, I don't make the rules. I-N-F-I-N-I-T-Y, now you're in my pool. I-N-F-I-N-I-T-Y, I don't make the rules. I-N-F-I-N-I-T-Y, and now you're in my pool. I-N-F-I-N-I-T-Y.
She's from County Monaghan originally. That's Rachel May Hannon. Brand new music from her, released on the 22nd. When was that? That was last Friday, I think, wasn't it? And a song that's called Infinity. We wish her well with it. Workers in community and voluntary sector organisations funded by the Health Service Executive and other state agencies are to take indefinite strike action from Tuesday the 17th of October. The Irish Congress of Trade Unions, ICTU as we call them, said that the action will involve thousands of health and community workers in a variety of grades and at multiple locations, bringing services to a halt. The organisations that will be impacted include Enable Ireland, the Irish Wheelchair Association and Family Resource Centres. Unions say that health and social care professionals employed in agencies funded by the HSE are paid significantly less than equivalent workers employed directly by the HSE and other state bodies. That decision to strike follows ballots carried out by FORSA, the Irish Nurses and Midwives Organisation, and SIPTU. All three unions said that ballot returns showed a high level of participation in the ballot and overwhelming support for industrial action up to and including strikes. The ballot took place following the breakdown of talks at the Workplace Relations Commission in July. ICTU General Secretary is Owen Reedy, and he said that the strike action is an inevitable consequence of the failure of the government to address a serious and growing problem with how the agencies are funded and a recruitment and retention crisis in vital services. He said the action was very serious. It is unprecedented, he said. But the words and actions of his members have fallen on deaf ears with the government. He added that 10 years of stagnation and falling behind is what justifies the action. The Department of Health said that recent engagements with unions at the Workplace Relations Commission had resulted in an offer of 5% increase in funding for pay effective from November, with 3% backdated to April. A commitment to re-engage with trade union representatives following any further public sector pay agreement was also offered, the department said. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. They've given plenty of notice, so hopefully the idea behind that is to get them talking once again. Here's an interesting one. Ireland's first university degree course for people who want to be influencers, you heard me, yeah, you heard me right, yeah, is to open for applications in November. The Bachelor of Arts in Content Creation and Social Media is due to begin at South East Technological University in Carlow next September. Speaking on RTE's News at 1 on Monday, Dr. Eleanor O'Leary, lecturer in media and communications at the university, said the industry has doubled in value globally since 2019, estimated to be between 14 and 16 billion worldwide. Wow. Lots of people end up working and collaborating with brands. They could be self-employed as an influencer, or they could go in with a company and or an organisation, and they could be involved as a content creator. The university has a number of degrees in the digital media profession and considers the course an expansion of that offering. Dr. O'Leary said the profession draws on existing public relations, marketing and media skills, but ultimately this is a new area in and of itself. She added that many young people are proficient in social media, but in terms of education, they look at adding business skills, developing people to be champions of their own growth as creatives, making sure that they understand critical cultural studies and teaching them technical skills such as video editing, audio editing, podcasting and writing. I think of those four skills, any child that's born, I think they come out of the womb now knowing how to do video editing, audio editing and podcasting. Writing, yeah, is a bit of an issue. That's a 4-year course. And I don't know. Yeah, well, I actually heard that interview and I wasn't 100% convinced that there was 4 years in it. But anyway, there you go. It's happening and we wish anybody that wants to go and do it and become an influencer the very best of luck. I'm going to take a very quick break. Come back to me just after that. We're going to be talking tyre safety with Pat Foodie. Don't miss this now, because it's not just about tyre safety in Ireland. It could save your life or it could avoid an accident, no matter where you're listening in the world.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
Pat Foodie is a well-known and well-respected businessman in County Clare, and he has spent many years selling tyres. But he's also very interested in road safety, and he's involved in something at the moment that I thought would be relevant no matter where you're listening to us in the world. Pat Foodie, thank you for joining me. How are you?
Very good, Ger. Very well, thank you very much.
Good. I hear the weather isn't great in Ireland.
No, well, today is not so bad, but tomorrow we'll promise a storm, and we have a lot of rain, got.
All right. And of course, that makes driving conditions even more hazardous, doesn't it?
Oh, sure. Treacherous. With the leaves falling now, with the storm, we'll knock down a lot of leaves, and it'll be rain, and it'll be deadly dangerous, deadly dangerous.
About a week before I returned to Spain, I burst a tyre on my car when I was reversing, and I clipped a footpath in the driveway. And I went down to yourself and we had a conversation about what you're doing at the minute while you were changing the tyre for me. And you have spent the last number of weeks travelling to various corners of the county, and you've been talking to second-level students about tyre safety. Where did the idea come from, Pat?
Well, I got an award from the RSA there for Christmas, a very prestigious award. I was very delighted to get it. I'm 50 years doing tyres, and this was acknowledgement for road safety that I have contributed to.
Great.
And then with the cars coming in and young drivers coming in with tyres in a really deplorable condition, wire out through them, bald as an egg, don't understand how speed and bald tyres on a wet road are a lethal combination together. And we're getting this every year for Tyre Safety Week. John Galvin, the champion office, comes in and he takes photographs, and there's no improvement. About 20% of what tyres we get in are completely below the limit, dangerously low, no grip, no tread, nothing in the world of them. So I said, look, I'm thinking of the young driver starting out. If I did something like this, it might hit the leaving cert classes, and they're the ones that are coming on the road.
All right. And since you've started your tour of the schools and talking to these, I suppose there'd be 16, 17, 18-year-olds, some of them would have their own cars, but I suppose most of them would have a family car. What has been the response? What has been the response?
Well, the response has been fantastic. And fantastic. First of all, the few with the cars have major questions to ask. They don't realise about locking the steering out as a way of doing is checking your tyres at home. and they don't ever thought about it. They don't realise about ball tyres, high up or down. They have no idea of it. It's not in any curriculum. It's on nothing. They just sit in and drive away. I have a golden rule telling each one of them, think of three things, petrol and diesel, and think of your tyres.
That's it.
Put them three together.
All right. So
and getting a fantastic response from the parents. They're ringing up. Then their daughter or their son was in such a school, and they saw this. They went home and checked the family car. Numerous of them, people have come in that the family car has been running on ball tyres. Never realised it.
My God.
Yeah.
The day that I was down with you, you showed me some of the tyres that you took off cars, and you remembered the stories. And that was only, you told me, in the week prior to me visiting your place. And they were in horrendous condition. People are driving on tyres that they shouldn't be out on, aren't they?
Oh, completely. Totally out of the question altogether. Totally bald. No grip, no hope in the world. Because of any accident, any speed, they're talking about fast speeds. You crash at 50 miles an hour on a country road with leaves and bad tyres. There's aquaplane to slip away from you. And then you have the dreaded burst, the blowout. That's happening all the time. And you lose control, even on the motorway, at 120 in a ball tyre, and around about your car will aquaplane will take off. We're taking about 50 tyres a week. We're doing about 250 tyres a week, 300. We're taking 50 tyres a week with the wire out home.
Go away.
That's 20%. And you can go to any county in Ireland, go into any tyre dealer like me, and ask him to show you ball tyres. They would all have the same as I have. And that's 20% of the cars in Ireland running on ball tyres.
When you go into the classrooms, Pat, how do you start, and what's involved in the demonstration that you do?
Last week, I took all the tyres that came in, and I lined them up in twos and ones and in a bunch, and took close photographs of them. And we enlarged those and put them up on a big screen, a big board.
Right.
And then I took in a new tyre with the 8mm. I took in one with 1.6, the legal limit. I took in a ball one. I took in one with the wire out. I took in a burst. Okay. So they can see the whole, and they're actually amazed. They come up and they feel them, they look at them. They can't believe they should go from new with 8mm down to zero, below zero. And there was one story. I did a talk in some school out the west last week, and the young fella saw, we have a video up there, you can see how to check your tyres by locking out your steering. You can see the full picture of the tyre. He rang a friend of his in Tulla, the other side of the county, and said he saw this at school today. The young fella in Tulla didn't know anything about this. He started his car. He was driving a Golf with a body load and a big 18-inch wheels. He couldn't see the tyre. He locked his wheel out to find he had a tyre completely on the wire across the whole surface.
A front tyre.
And trodden on flat, he was still driving it. That young fella now had about 20 miles left, and he was gone over the wall or gone into another car. He never realised it. He came in for the tyre, and he couldn't believe what he had. I couldn't believe it either.
Wow. And what kind of questions are you getting, Pat, from the students?
The students to know, first of all, how would they know? Well, that's why we brought out the video. That you can lock the steering, a very simple thing at home. They all thought you had to go into a garage like me and that they'd be looking at you and this and that. You don't have to do that. You can lock the steering out at home. You get the full picture of your tyre. I'll go down on the and look at the back. Some of the cars wear on the back, very few, but some few do wear on the inside. And just tracking. And tracking is out, you won't know about it, but you'll see your tyre with the wire out, and you're gone then. And the question is then, some young fella said, I can't afford to buy a tyre, can I turn it inside out? No, you can't. The wire is out, whether it's inside or outside, it's out.
No such thing as turning the tyre inside out. There isn't.
No.
And you said to me that some of the children have gone home, or students I should call them, because they're not children anymore, and they've checked their family car, and they have found problems with it. So that must be very satisfying, Pat.
Well, it is. I'll tell you one story. I did a talk up in North Clare, and the father of this girl came in. He said, Pat, he's a man that had got tyres himself maybe a week before that. Pat, he said, I must compliment you. He said, on this talk you gave up on the school. My daughter was in that school. I wouldn't know the daughter. Yeah. And he said she came home and she said that you had been there and you did a talk. And she said she wanted to look at the tyres. So I brought her out. We started the car. We looked at it. She looked at her mother's tyres. They were fine. But there's a man down the road a little bit. And she said, I wonder how his protocol tyres. She went down next door to the man and told him she saw this at school and locked out his steering. He had 2 ball tyres as bald as an egg on the car. And he was in for the tyres. I didn't know about this. He was in for 2 tyres and didn't say anything. The girl next door looked at him. I didn't know about the girl to see. And the father came in to say how she got her. She's like a girl now. He said, every car she sees, she's looking at the front of it. But if it goes across what I'd be hoping is this video and this talk would go to the schools, that they would download it to the 5th years, the leaving cert class. If it happened that it could be done with the education board here or whatever, it would hit 50,000 young drivers hitting on the road every year.
Right.
And them are the ones that I want to hit, because these are the ones that are getting killed and hurt. As I said today, there's so many people, they're talking about all this killed. There's 150 killed here this year. And all I'm thinking about is all the ones that are hurt. A life-changing experience for a family or for any child or any father to get hurt or get on a wheelchair or get whiplash. You know, it's a life-changing thing for the family.
There's a lot of emphasis on watching your speed in Ireland at the moment because of the number of road crashes that have happened this year particularly. And but there's very little on tyre safety, isn't there?
There's nothing. There's nothing on it. Nothing. They're all talking speed. But when I show my program I say speed is one thing, but you can be talking of 120 kilometres an hour and having a crash. But you're talking at 50 kilometres an hour in a country road with leaves falling and all that in a ball tyre. You press the brake in the corner, there's someone coming against you or an animal on the road, and you skid. It's a matter about speed. You go in the wall, you won't get killed maybe at 50 or 60 kilometres an hour, which will damage your car. But if you go at 100 kilometres an hour on the motorway or 120 and you hit water and you aquaplane, you'll wind up hitting the fellow beside you or hitting something. That's where the problem is.
Yeah, that's it.
And tyres are the main holder. At the best time you have, only on the ground, you only have a piece of rubber about the size of the sole of your shoe.
Wow.
That's all you have on the ground.
That's it.
I can't believe this in the school. I've shown them a tyre, stand it up on the table and say, look see all of that's on the table. Little bit, like the size of your shoe, that's all. The tyre isn't, the whole tyre is not on the road ever. It's only revolving, but the little bit on the ground is only a small bit of rubber, roughly about maybe 4 or 5 inches wide.
I remember as a child, there was a television commercial on about the 5 best friends that you have, and the 4 wheels and the spare wheel, and it showed people driving over glass and hitting curbs.
Yeah.
But I remember back at that. Do you not remember that? No, back in the 70s.
No, I don't.
Yeah, the Trump line kind of was 5. Yeah. They're the 5 best friends you have, and you treat them like dirt.
Well,
don't.
You know something? That's a very, very good story and a very good program it should be, because that's all you have on the is 5 little bits of rubber the size of your shoe at 100 kilometres an hour or 120.
All right. The importance.
That's all you have.
Yeah, and you mentioned a video that you have, and you do. A number of years ago, John Galvin went down and he videoed you in the tyre shop, and you showed him, some of the tyres and that. If people want to take a look at that, they can, and I'll tell them how to do it in a minute. But I also know that John Galvin from the Clare Champion newspaper, John is very interested in motoring and safety and all that kind of stuff. Very and he was with you in one of the schools, and he did a new video. So that will be up online very shortly as well, won't it?
It will. He did it today. He did me on the class doing the performance in the school.
Great.
And was there for the questions and answer sessions and did the whole thing.
Fantastic.
And spoke himself about the video and about tyres and all that. It's a brilliant. It isn't at the moment. I say it'll be up probably a day or 2.
That's fine.
And it's something that's very, very good. It'll see exactly what we're at, and hoping to God will travel further. I have contacted the 19 secondary schools in there. I have contacted them all. I think it is 7 or 8 have come back already. I have done 5. So I'm doing as fast as I can, and as fast as they come back to me. That will fit me into the curriculum, But I tell you one thing, with the response we've got from the pupils and from the teachers, and some teachers are saying, my God, when you're lying about it, I went up to my own tyres and I had to go up and get 2. Do you know? It's just an appalling situation here. And it's just not being looked at.
For anybody listening to this anywhere in the world, it works in left-hand drive cars and right-hand drive cars. You just lock out the steering and have a look.
That's all you do. It's a simple process. People think they have to go into the garage, into me, to get an advice and all that. You don't have to. Just start your car, lock out the steering to the left and right. It brings your wheel out. Under the modern car, the wing is down over the wheel and you won't see the tyre. Mm-hmm. And this will bring the wheel out, completely out, looking at you, so you can see the full surface of the tyre. Now, in the back, you have to go down your knees and look, but that's only once and again. There's only a few cars way on the back, not them all, but the front is deadly with tracking. Deadly.
How often should you be checking your tyres, Pat?
I'd say turn out once a month. It's no possible, it costs you nothing, just once a month, because the tracking is out a lot. Over a period of, say, 2,000 or 3,000 kilometres, you will bring down the wear on the tyre. You will bring down the rubber on the inside,
I remember popping into you one time a couple of years ago and saying, Pat, will you have a look at the tracking on that for me, make sure it is all right? And you did.
Yeah.
And it was spot on. It was just before I returned to Spain, actually, and I was driving back. And you did. So you can do that in any tyre shop, I would imagine.
And the thing about it is, anywhere around you go, we check the tracking and we check the air pressure free of charge and look at your tyres for everybody all year round. It doesn't matter who or what. We check them for you. We have a lot of people that come in and they say, how are my tyres? We look at them, we check the tracking, make sure it is okay, and especially for the NCT, the tracking has to be done, because if it isn't right, there is a rebooking charge on €28 to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we have to adjust it, we charge something up for it. But normally, when it's okay, we just do it free, look at the tyres, and there's no charge. And we're all the same. All of us check tyres free, no problem.
You said that you contacted 19 secondary schools in County Clare. You've done
Clare,
5 of them, 8 of them responded, I think, or 12, you said to me. And then,
and there's more of them have responded. They're trying to fit me into the curriculum, because I need half an hour, and they're willing to give it.
Great.
And more of them coming online every day.
And Pat, because you won't say it, I'm going to say it for you. You're doing this at your own expense, and you're not charging.
Oh, I am. I'm doing this and I'm funding this myself. I'm no charge on this, no charge. I'm paying for the whole thing, no charge on this. No.
It's a phenomenal community service and a really worthwhile one. And as you said to me, if we can save just one life, won't it all be worth it?
The young fella in Tulla that came in with the car Saturday morning with the wire out all over the tyre, I would hope to God that I saved him, because he was facing the blowout in about 20 miles. You know.
Wow.
No question about it. Yeah.
All right.
I was shocked.
I bet you were. Pat Foodie from Ennis, thank you so well. That's where you're working out of his Ennis. You're not an Ennis man originally, but there you go. Thanks a million for taking the call and telling us about the initiative.
Welcome. And thank you for having me. And I hope to God that somebody hears this, that they will look at their tyres and it might save their life.
Thanks, Pat.
God bless it.
Walking in the morning light, stone-cold walls and the grey skies. The cemetery whispers so many names. Seamus and Laura pray for John and James. Now there's one that makes me smile. Gotta wonder how she lived her life. Talking about Susie gossip under the shade of the tree. Susie, who is she? Talking about Susie gossip. Moving on our home and sing your name, Lady Gossip. Yeah, she's got it all. I wanna write you the world's greatest song and sing about how much you meant to everyone. Gonna tell the town about the good you done. Talking about Susie gossip, hear her name on the breeze. Susie, who is she? Talking about Susie gossip, talking about Susie. Not Eleanor Rigby, all of the village were there. Everyone cared. Talking about Susie gossip, sinking ships on the sea. Susie, who is she? Talking about Susie gossip. Susie was a mom mom and a loving wife. She'd say you gotta hold on to the ones who treat you right. It's like a good run at the picture house, or like a movie that stays with you long after the crowd's gone. Talking about Susie, Susie gossip under the shade of the tree. Susie, who is she? Talking about Susie gossip, talking about Susie, Susie gossip, hear her name on the breeze. Susie, who is she? Talking about Susie gossip, talking about Susie, Susie gossip, sinking ships on the sea. Susie, who is she? Talking about Susie gossip, talking about Susie. Talking about Susie.
Isn't that lovely? It's the second track that I've played on the programme from that new album from Alton Conlon called The Starlight Ballroom. That's a song called Susie Gossip. Really nice. Pat Foodie, thanks very much. As I said to you earlier, I recorded that with him yesterday evening and really did appreciate him taking time to talk to me. Wasn't it brilliant? I'll tell you one thing. Yeah, it really makes you think about stuff, and hopefully it'll be of some use to you. If you want to find that video, it's a very basic video, but it tells the story. It's just him in the garage and he's looking at tyres and he's talking about different things. His name is Pat Foodie, Foudy, and you'll find it on YouTube. Just put his name in there and maybe the Clare Champion, Clare, Clare Champion, in there as well, because that's the name of the newspaper whose YouTube channel it is. And there'll be a new one up. John Galvin is going to let me know when it's up, and I will let you know in case you just want to see the new one. See Pat in the classroom. Right, let's do a quick break. Come back to me just a moment, please.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
This is Talk Radio Europe.
Do you want to know what's happening in the south of Spain? Do you want regular news from a source you can trust? In a recent survey, 8 out of 10 readers on the Costa del Sol said that Soar in English was their favourite English language newspaper. It's easy to see why. Soar in English boasts an international newsroom with dozens of journalists gathering reliable, accurate and balanced information from around Spain, Andalusia and the Costa del Sol. The perfect combination of news and features from and for the international community. Soar in English, linking communities and supporting local businesses for nearly 40 years. Pick up a copy of your favourite read every Friday or read it online at soarinenglish.com.
Spain Today. Join me for an hour of concise information across the daily Spanish news spectrum to keep you informed about the things that matter to you, to enhance your enjoyment of living in Spain.
Spain Today, presented by
Howard Brereton.
Join Howard Brereton weekdays from 6 p.m.
Talk Radio Europe.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
Despite the fact that he forgot my name a little earlier on, I thought, sure, look, we'll give Howard an old dig out and play his promo. The reference hourly living wage rate should rise to €14.80 per hour. That's according to the Living Wage Technical Group, LWTG. This is an increase of 6.9% or 95 cents compared to the previous reference rate of $13.85 per hour. The living wage is seen as the minimum rate required for a full-time worker to afford the goods and services that people have agreed are essential for enabling a life with dignity. The LWTG said that the increase in the living wage is driven by the rising cost of living, over the last 12 months, particularly for energy, food and accommodation. Last year, the government agreed to the introduction of a new national living wage to replace the minimum wage by 2026. It'll be phased in over a 4-year period and will be set at 60% of the hourly median wage. Now, the Living Wage Technical Group uses a different method to calculate the living wage and bases it on the rationale that full-time employment should at least provide for a socially acceptable minimum standard of living for a single person without dependents. Robert Thornton is research manager with the Vincentian MESL research group and a member of the LWTG. He said that having an income below this standard of living means doing without goods and services which are essential for taking part in the norms of everyday life in Ireland. The minimum wage, I believe, is going to rise by about €1 this year when the budget is announced in the next couple of weeks. But when it does, it's still going to be about just over €2 behind what they suggest is the appropriate living wage, as we just mentioned. So that'll be interesting to see how that continues onwards. Yes, I want to tell you about this. The Northern and Western Regional Assembly, the NWRA, has called for a stimulus package of more than €500 million to prevent what it terms the economic stagnation in Western and border counties. The Assembly says the funding is needed to tackle regional inequality and to promote more balanced development across the whole country. It's seeking at least €570 million for this purpose and has called on the government to adopt a policy of positive discrimination for the rollout of infrastructure contained in the National Development Plan. The NWRA brings together local authorities from counties Donegal, Sligo, Leitrim, Mayo, Galway, Roscommon, Cavan and Monaghan. It's one of 3 such regional assemblies. One taking in the south of the country. The other is being responsible for the East and Midlands. And in its pre-budget submission, the NWRA says that a legacy of underinvestment has led to the region being categorised as lagging by the European Parliament. This is a term used to refer to development challenges such as low productivity, a weaker business environment and poorer educational outcomes. GDP per capita across the region is between 75 and 100% of the EU 27 average, making the West and border areas the only region in Ireland to hold such a status. The NWRA says that the gap in disposable income per head of population between the Northern and Western region and the Eastern and Midlands regions of Ireland as a percentage of the state average was 25 percentage points in 2021. This compares with a gap of 10% in 2010. The Assembly's economist, John Daly, says that the adoption of a positive discrimination policy for the region is urgently needed to address the current Eastern-focused regional imbalance. Mr. Daly said that without access to modern roads, public transport, health and port services, the West and border region would never be able to provide a meaningful counterbalance to the rapid expansion of the Greater Dublin area. The NWRA envisages that a multi-million euro investment package could be used for high-value economic activity as part of a wider effort to keep people living and working along the border and the western seaboard. Mr. Daly said that a stimulus fund would kickstart essential development and help start to reverse economic stagnation. In addition, the representative body is seeking a citizens' assembly to examine how greater levels of regional autonomy can be delivered. It says the model of centralised government has led to greater inequality and disengagement in rural regions. And you know what? He's not wrong. Not by a long shot, so he's not, as the fella says. So yeah, be interesting to see what happens there. No, I'm not going to give you this story. What I will do is tell you what's coming up in the next hour of the programme. I'm going to be talking to a very interesting man because I've already had a quick chat with him. And we're going to be talking about a 6,000-year-old, what they call court tomb that was found originally back in 1966 in Northern Ireland, and it had to be relocated. It's found a new home at the Ulster Folk Museum. I'll be talking to Dr. Greer Ramsey in the second hour of the programme about that, and I'm looking forward to it. I hope that you will join me.
Talk Radio Europe.
Your voice in Spain.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
And you're welcome back to the programme. I forgot to check where Arsenal playing tonight, because if they are, Julie will be leaving us early. She's very good. She'll send a text and just say, I have to go now. Arsenal playing, so good luck. That's our Julie that works out of the UK. Anyway, there we have it. It just dawned on me there when I heard them talking about the soccer. I told you what's coming up in this hour of the programme, so I better give you some news. This is interesting because you never know. You might have a vocation and you might be interested. The Diocese of Killaloe, one of the largest Catholic dioceses in Ireland, has announced a year-long initiative to encourage men to consider joining the priesthood. It's part of a national effort by the Catholic Church in Ireland to increase vocations to the diocesan priesthood this year. The Killaloe Diocese has begun a promotional campaign across counties Clare, Limerick, Tipperary, Offaly and Laois. Visits to parishes across the diocese, including Ennis, Neenah, Burr and Castleconnell, will begin next week. With just over half of the 58 parishes in the diocese currently served by a resident priest, the aim is to build upon the 3 vocations recorded in the diocese during the past 12 months. Wow, 3 in 12 months, according to Vocations Director Father Iggy McCormick. Now, geographically, the diocese is the 3rd largest in the country and it has become increasingly difficult to maintain full cover across the 5 counties due to retirements and lower number of vocations, he said. The idea of young men taking up a vocation has arguably become more countercultural in recent years, but the diocese is hopeful that it can build on recent progress, whereby 3 men from the diocese will enter the seminary at Maynooth over the next 12 months. Father McCormick, who is also the principal of St. Flannan's College in Ennis, has said that the Vocations Initiative will encourage people to discover more about vocations on the diocesan website. He said the parish church visits are aimed at kickstarting conversations within family groups with local priests and in communities across the diocese on the vocation of priesthood. Father McCormick is encouraging any man who has been considering a vocation to contact the vocations office or to speak with their local priest. Most newly ordained priests will comment on how the encouragement and counsel that they received from their local priest greatly assisted in commencing their journey to priestly ministry, he said. So there we go. You never know. You might be interested in that. I suppose the startling thing about that is that, and it's kind of an unusual one for me, you've got to keep saying men, because they're only looking for men, obviously, because they haven't adopted the idea of women priests as yet in the church in Ireland, but the Catholic Church anywhere across the world. Here's one that you might be interested in as well. I know that we have Irish listeners, be it maybe in Spain on their holidays or maybe in their second home, but you will be heading back home maybe at some stage. But so this might be of interest to you. Birdwatch Ireland has renewed calls for volunteers and skilled observers to help monitor and record wintering waterbird populations at important wetlands sites around the country. One such site is Inner Galway Bay, where the first workshop took place last weekend. New and experienced participants attended the bird sanctuary in Rusheen Bay as part of a drive towards the conservation of wild birds and their natural habitats. Ireland is an important wintering area for migratory waterbirds, ducks, geese, swans and wading birds, amongst others, that breed at Arctic latitudes and migrate southwards to spend the winter on Irish estuaries, coastal bays, rivers and lakes. The data collected enables regular assessment of the numbers and trends of wintering waterbirds. Every year between September and March, hundreds of volunteers across the country record wintering waterbirds at important wetland sites in their areas, says Niamh Fitzgerald, the National Coordinator of Birdwatch Ireland. These are the main months that most waterbird species occur in Ireland. Those who sign up to participate in the Irish Wetland Bird Survey will be asked to conduct 4 counts at their site. Ongoing studies have shown that climate change is causing shifts in the migratory behaviour of many of the familiar wintering waterbirds. Milder winters mean that many species no longer have to migrate as far as Ireland in order to migrate ice-free wetlands. in order to find ice-free wetlands. In addition, climate change is making conditions increasingly unsuitable on the breeding grounds, with the resulting poorer breeding success, meaning that in some years, very few young are raised at all. This means not only are fewer birds arriving in Ireland, but the global population as a whole is declining. Brian Burke, a member of Birdwatch Ireland's conservation team, says that Ireland's wintering waterbirds have declined by 40% in recent decades. The rise of decline is alarming, and the declines noted in Ireland are consistent with the global pattern of decline. Numerous pressures can impact migratory birds on their breeding grounds along their migration route, and their wintering sites. And it is known that climate change is playing a significant role in this. A second workshop will take place at the Marine Institute in Renville, in Oranmore, on the 6th of October. And the events are organised by Birdwatch Ireland in collaboration with Galway County Council, Galway City Council, and the Marine Institute. Sorry, I fell over that a little bit midway through because I was trying to remember where I picked up information about eels travelling across the Atlantic Ocean and spending about 12 years. And I remembered then, because I was thinking, was this the story that was, and no. I was going through a story from Patricia for next week, and we'll have a story from Patricia about another one of Ireland's great waterways, and she was talking about eels in that, and that's where I heard it. So anyway, that's why I was kind of falling over. My mind was drifting, and I was trying to not let it drift, but it just was anyway, and there was nothing I could do. If you know your Irish music, you'll know the name Dolores Kane. She's got a brand new single, and this is it.
I was drawn to the bright light to see the cobwebs on the wall. Sang stages the world over, from the famous to the small. The song I was singing from the heart, but the life I was living, complicated from the start. I was drawn to the wrong roads. The bottle became my friend. I held the neck so tightly in case the flow would end. I made some poor decisions, hurt loved ones along the way. I'm here to say I'm sorry. I regret things every day. I sang through my troubles, I drank through my pain. Music was my refuge. Music kept me sane. People thought they owned me to do what I was told. Music was my rainbow, my constant drop of gold. I was drawn to the self-doubts that were messing with my head. I thought booze was the answer, but it made it worse instead. I know the people love me, and that has kept me strong. But it's not about me anyway, for the hope is in the song. I sang through my troubles, I drank through my pain. Music was my refuge, music kept me sane. People thought they owned me to do what I was told. Music was my rainbow, my constant rock of gold. I sang through my troubles, I drank through my pain. Music was my refuge, music kept me sane. People thought they owned me to do what I was told. Music was my rainbow, my constant rock of gold.
It's a sad song, but she's here to sing it. She's here to write it, and that's good. That is Dolores Kane, and a brand new single from her called My Refuge. And yeah, it's all out there, isn't it? Very much so. I'm going to take a very quick break, and coming up just after that, I'm going to be talking to Dr. Ger Ramsey. He is the Curator of Archaeology at the National Museums Northern Ireland. We're going to talk about court tombs. 6,000-year-old court tomb has found a new home at the Folk Museum, the Ulster Folk Museum. Looking forward to that, coming up just after these.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
A court tomb older than the Egyptian pyramids. You heard me. Older than the Egyptian pyramids, has secured a permanent new home on display at the Ulster Folk Museum. The 6,000-year-old tomb, which dates back to Neolithic era, was discovered in Ballintaggart in County Armagh. Now, I'm not telling you this because it has just been discovered. That happened over 50 years ago. I'm telling you because they have, as I said in the introduction, a permanent new home at the Ulster Folk Museum. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined on the line via Zoom by Dr. Ger Ramsey, who is the Curator of Archaeology at National Museums Northern Ireland. Dr. Ramsey, it's lovely to talk to you. Welcome to the programme. How are you?
Well, not too bad. Well, I'm just looking out here and we are catching the tail of Storm Agnes. So I hope the weather is slightly better where you are than it is here.
I can't wait for this conversation to be over so I can open the window. I chose it to keep the noise down. Anyway, I believe Storm Agnes is going to pass through very quickly, and hopefully she won't leave too much damage in her wake. Let's talk about the court tomb firstly, if we can. What's a court tomb?
What is a court tomb? Well, we are based here at the Ulster Folk Museum site outside Kiltraw. And one of the ways that I would begin to describe it, if you imagine we are standing up a hill and we're looking down towards Belfast Lough at about 10,000 years ago, or 8,000 BC. That's during the period of the Mesolithic. These people were hunter-gatherers. They had minimal impact on the environment. So the environment would be heavily forested. You imagine we are standing in that same spot at about 6,000 years ago, or 4,000 BC. What we would begin to witness then is the origins of agriculture. So people moving into the Irish landscape, bringing with them the skills of farming, arable crops, and a range of domesticated animals, some of which we would be very familiar with today. And one of the challenges facing them was obviously to clear the forest and to set up home, essentially. And they were able, because they had a greater control over the environment, it was worth their while investing in permanent settlements. And we could talk maybe a little bit about Neolithic houses in a minute. But because they were able to stay in the one place longer, it was worth their while building things. And one of the things that stood very prominent in the landscape are a range of megalithic tombs. And megalithic is from the Greek, meaning large stone tombs. And these stone tombs occur throughout Ireland. And they're called really by different names influenced by their form or shape. And the reason a court tomb is called a court tomb, if we try to imagine that you have a semicircular arc of stones, and then you have a gallery leading off it. If you try to think what a lobster essentially looks like, if it was holding out its claws, it would be forming a semicircular shape. And that acts as the court. And the court was a focal point for the beginning of the burial rite. And then you had a narrow tunnel. And these were the chambers where the dead were buried. So there was actually in the region of some 400 court tombs from Ireland. Interestingly, they have a northerly distribution. So we find examples sort of in Sligo, Roscommon, and then in the whole Ulster region. So it's kind of appropriate that a northern-ish, the most popular court tomb, in the north is re-erected on the Folk Museum site, and that's essentially what a court tomb is.
Now, this, as I said to you, we'll come back and we'll talk maybe more about, as you said, about the housing and things like that. This was found in 1966. It was the year before I was born. And it's only now, after getting itself a permanent base. Tell us about the finding of it. Who found it? Where exactly?
Well, if we turn the clock back, as you say, to the 60s and 1966, the court tomb then stood just a few miles outside of Portadown in County Armagh. And coming up to 1966, it was threatened by the extension of a quarry.
Okay.
So the quarry was essentially going to destroy the court tomb. And the keeper of antiquities on the Ulster Museum, then a man called Lawrence Flanagan, decided that they would go out initially and try to excavate the site. They weren't particularly hopeful that they would find a lot of material because they knew that the site had been disturbed in around 1902 by a Mrs. Breton, and no records really remain of the site. So they went not really expecting to find what we would describe as many grave goods. They didn't find any human remains, we'll come back to that later, but they did find, and we talked about this, a collection of pottery sherds and flints. But what they essentially were looking at was if you imagine, was the outline of the court tomb. It's like a bit of the plan or foundations of the house. And they thought, look, it would be a shame if this was ultimately destroyed. So they actually made a plan of the tomb as well as excavating it. And they moved the stones to the Ulster Museum site. And it actually stood then outside the Ulster Museum site until around 2006.
Okay.
In many ways, the price of progress caught up with it for the second time. That when the Ulster Museum was renovated and extended beginning in 2006, the tomb, which was literally outside the walls, was moved to where we are now, the Folk Museum site. And there really, it sat for a number of years. And there was a particular interest shown by a local community association in Portadown called the Richmount Rural Community Association. And they were interested in seeing what were the various options as to where would be the best place to locate it. And that sent the current sort of process in motion. And although there were indeed plans of the site when it was excavated, but involved working with Queen's Archaeology Department and the Engineering Department, essentially of making a model of the tomb, so working out from the plan where the stones would go back, and then really, I suppose, installing it. So if you had been here 6 months ago in the dead of winter, you'd have seen men running around, with hard hats and JCBs trying to work out where all these stones were, which of course brings us back to one of the interesting things, is just the sheer awe that we have. The people 6,000 years ago could shift those stones. In some of the older maps, they're actually referred to as giants' graves because the people really thought, because of their size, it was giants that made them. So the story again then, 66, in danger of being destroyed, moved to the Ulster Museum. There it stays for a while, and now moves to the Folk Museum and is re-erected in a kind of a permanent site.
And what was found, you said there was bits of pottery and stuff like that were found at the time. What did you learn, or what was learned that wasn't known when these findings were happened?
Well, it's probably not so much that not so much that it really added new evidence.
Okay.
But the material was interesting in a number of aspects. It shows really what people chose to bury as grave goods. And what interests me in particular is that if you take the date of this tomb, suppose it's around, 6,000 years ago, approximately 4,000 BC. This is, of course, before any of our major religions, irrespective of what religion we choose to call ourselves or of none. Yet these people had a fascination with the afterlife and a drive to preserve and to have grave goods, which we presume they thought would have been of use in the afterlife. For example, in other tombs, when we get to the Bronze Age, some of the pottery vessels are called food vessels, and people believe that they were food for the afterlife. Okay. More often, they contained the cremated bones. So essentially, what was found was a number of pottery sherds, and they have been reconstructed, and those pots are on display in the Ulster Museum. And then we got a series of flints, and some of those flints is obviously slightly harder to describe on radio, but there would have been characteristic of flints found in the Neolithic period, including on settlement sites. So even if you didn't have an independent date and calendar years, certain of the flint finds only occurred in the Neolithic period. Okay. And the pottery itself is interesting. On a wider scale, there has been a study including examples of other pots in our collection, though not Ballintaggart, of what we would call the lipids or fats that adhere to the inside of the pottery vessels. Because the pottery vessels, these are not wheel-thrown pottery vessels. They're fine vessels in their own right. Very, very difficult to make, as I had an experience of recently. But probably being more slightly porous, these fats or lipids survive. And we can use that to answer the question, were people in the Neolithic more fond of Irish stew or muesli? So we would talk about it did it have a meat signature, maybe a marine signature or a dairying signature. And what we do, of course, and you could, if there's any listeners, they can stick up their hand or have a discussion themselves. So which did you think it was? Was it a dairy signature, a meat signature? Would you prepare to guess yourself? Do you think it was more meat or more dairy?
I would have thought it would have been more meat.
Well, actually, the surprising answer is that the overriding signature is a dairying signature. So these were being used, I presume, for oats and milk and essentially milk-based products. And that led to quite a kind of a slightly at a wrangle conversation among ourselves. And we would hear today that, that people would be lactose intolerant. Mm-hmm. They react badly to dairy products. But actually, if you come particularly from Ireland, in particular, we have a 6,000-year-old dairying tradition industry, and we should actually not be particularly lactose intolerant. What you do find, it was very interesting, we had discussions even with people within our organisation that are originally from other areas, that you'd be surprised how other people can react really, really badly to milk-based products, essentially, if they're not used them. So the same pottery that is occurring to a certain extent in the burials is also occurring in the settlement sites. Other objects that didn't occur in Ballintaggart but occur in other court tombs would be polished stone axes. So these are kind of small axes to which they would have attached a wooden handle. And one of the challenges, if you imagine if you think we arrived in Ballintaggart 6,000 years ago, we mentioned that the landscape was very, very different. Mm-hmm. So they would have had to cut down the trees. So one of the most common objects that we find in the Neolithic are polished stone axes. There's something maybe in the region of about 20,000 of those. And we're getting maybe a bit technical now, but in one particular area of the north of Ireland, in Rathlin Island and in a place called T Bulla, which is above Cushendun, they particularly singled out a type of stone known as porcelainite, and it only occurred in those two locations. And what antiquarians record is they went up to the T Bulla site, And essentially they found hundreds and hundreds of what we would call a rough out. So you imagine you get the axe and you rough out the shape. They never found any finished axes at the site. So what they were doing, they were going up, they were roughing out the shape. They were taking it back essentially to where they lived. They were creating a polished stone with sand and water and literally grinding and polishing the stones. So if you can bear with this conversation, so we now know that porcelainite only occurs in the north of Ireland. Going back to the 50s, one of the first professors of archaeology at Queen's thought, look, I'm going to go have a look at stone axe collections, say, in the Republic, but also in England and Scotland and Wales, and look to see, if they've any authenticated find spots, was this object obviously found in Wales? And what they found is that essentially Irish stone travelled throughout Ireland and across the water. And this led to the idea of trading, as I say, when without breakfast and without breakfast in the border in the Irish Sea, right. they were swapping goods quite easily in the Neolithic. Other objects that we occur in collections that we associated with that time would be some objects specifically for agriculture. So again, if you can imagine, if I was to describe, we have a stone called a saddle quern, and this really is essentially a concave object, and it has a rubbing stone. So you'd put your seeds or your corn or your wheat, and you would grind it down. So they were creating a basic flour. We also get for the first time. We know very, very little about the clothes these people wear. They just do not survive. But we find, for example, the first items of jewelry. So they made stone beads. And then certain objects that probably acted like as symbols of power. Again, these are hard to describe, but these were round objects like a mace or a scepter. So round stone objects, sometimes using lovely patterned stone where they would have drilled a hole through them. And this brings us back to the discussion about, you imagine the making of these tombs and the physical effort involved. And what is absolutely clear is that it almost certainly involved more people to create them than was ever going to be buried in them. So this is the idea then that we're dealing with a hierarchical society, and you find that even more so. If we talk about the Republic of Ireland, the famous passage graves from Newgrange and from County Meath, which are a totally bigger scale altogether. So people had a fascination in the afterlife for many years.
The fact we were talking earlier on, you mentioned that these particular tombs are most prevalent in Northern Ireland. And is that because the people that came, let's say, from maybe Norway, Finland, via Scotland would have migrated towards Northern Ireland as opposed to maybe other parts? So has it a lot to do with where the settlers came from?
Well, it's a whole really debate as to where the settlers came from. We do find other types of tombs that have wider distribution. We mentioned the famous passage tombs in Newgrange. Mm-hmm. We find ones that have featured in the past, I suppose, in Guinness adverts, that have the huge capstones. It may be that there were different trends at different times. One of the things about the court tombs in particular is that there has been a program of radiocarbon dating. So this is kind of an independent dating method to give us calendar years. But radiocarbon dates would have a certain error associated with them, So they're not giving exact, you're giving maybe with a range within a few hundred years or maybe a 1,000 years. And what they have found remarkably is a lot of the court tombs that have been dated are branching around 3,600, 3,800 BC. Okay. So it's almost as if there was a kind of a minor, well, I'm going to explain why I'm going to say a property boom and maybe not quite a death boom was there, but so as I say, I'll go back then. So what it then becomes, so these are grouping around, say, 3,800 BC. So surely 4,000 BC. But what you find then too is when you begin to look at houses. So if you were to ask me, say 50, 60 years ago, there weren't very many Neolithic houses known. But with particular the boom in the Celtic Tiger and the Republic and gas pipelines and development of the road infrastructures, the number of Neolithic houses now would probably run over 100.
Okay.
And a lot of them conform to a conventional pattern of being rectangular houses. When you excavate a Neolithic house, you're not going to get upright timbers. Essentially, what you're going to get, again, is this idea of the foundations. So they would have dug kind of slots to put in oak planks. And when those old planks decay, they essentially stain the ground a different colour from the surrounding ground. So when you scrape back the topsoil, what essentially you're doing is you're following the shape of the corroded post. So it stains the ground a different colour. So that's how you can excavate out and get the shape. Where are they dating to? They are also bouncing in around 3,700, 3,800 BC. And that sort of kind of raised the question. I'm not sure if we're going to run out of time here.
No, you're fine.
But how essentially then did sort of agriculture develop? Was it a case that it developed relatively slowly? Was it a case that the Neolithic, the hunter-gatherers, which were before the Neolithic farmers, did they witness people, taking agriculture on, did they witness people maybe planting a few crops? Did they travel? Did they bring it back themselves? That does not seem to be the case. It seems to be, the lock, stock and two smoking barrels. The agriculture was brought into Ireland, in around this period, shortly after 4,000 BC, building houses and really building these megalithic tombs. And because they are visible in the landscape, they stand out. One of the things to point out, if I was to show you a photograph of Ballintaggart Court tomb, it would look absolutely nothing like it looked originally.
Okay.
So what you have to try imagine is, so you have these stones forming a semicircular arc. You would have essentially they had a tunnel. The Ballintaggart Tower has 4 chambers, and those chambers are delineated by stone. So if you looked at it, you would be able to walk through chamber 1, 2, 3, and 4. But you imagine if you would draw the analogy of a table, what essentially the tabletop is missing. So you're walking down a gap, but there would have been capstones creating essentially a tunnel. And then the whole structure itself would be covered in a huge mound of earth and stones. And so what happened really over the years is that, it begins to get knocked down and weathered, but a lot of the stones that form the cairn material, cairn means stone. So on earlier maps, sometimes they're called cairns, sometimes they're called giant's graves, sometimes they're called chambers grave. But a lot of the stones would have been robbed to build field boundaries. And some of the large capstones would be very useful. So it's imagined that we've picked away at the top, we've picked away at most of those, and we're left with an outline. So it wasn't a case of trying to recreate an example as it would have stood in the past. Incidentally, one of the best examples, or some of the best examples of court tombs actually exist also in County Sligo.
Okay. Interesting. Very good. What's the importance of this then for us in 2023, and what's the importance going to be, in future years?
Well, first of all, one of the problems of any monuments that exist out in the countryside or exist near towns, unfortunately, is that they can be damaged, they can be vandalised.
Yeah.
There was various discussions as to where was the best place to put this, near where it originally was or in an area like this. But I suppose within the Folk Museum, it's protected. It was a major project to re-erect it, and it cost it cost a reasonable amount of money with an engineering company to do it. If you visited the Folk Museum, we tend probably to think that the agriculture and folk way of life is something maybe comparatively recent. So if you walk around the Folk Museum site, we would have a range of buildings from both the rural and urban landscape. But most of those buildings, and as I say, I'm not an expert on the site, we're talking about, within a few hundred years, we're all familiar with things, thatched cottages and kind of landscapes. And then we maybe tend to think, well, like agriculture then is, is something maybe that is relatively recent. But if we think of what our Ballintaggart ancestors in many ways have left us, they've left us a legacy in stone. And we have recreated the Folk Museum site. But what it does is acts as, I suppose, as a chronological starting point to realize that our agricultural journey began not a few hundred years ago, but 6,000 years ago. And also, when we think of our landscape, we mentioned that the earlier hunter-gatherers, because they were nomadic, because they didn't have the skills of agriculture, they were essentially following the food resources around. They had low population densities and had a minimal impact on the environment. One of the ways, is it an inevitable consequence? Perhaps not, perhaps yes, but of agriculture is the clearing of fields. So imagine, the fields cleared in a small scale, having little impact. But this marks the beginning, I suppose, of a period of deforestation that starts off very slowly and then accelerates through time and leaves us with our modern agricultural landscape that we see today.
We talked about the difficulty that they must have had in building this when you see the size of some of the rocks and so on. Do we know how long it would take for them to build one of this? Because I know you have to factor in how many people were involved, where the stone was sourced, all that. Do we know?
To be honest, it's not something that I'm overly familiar with. There's been various experiments of trailing these stones along on logs and all these kind of. I suppose when you get into look at what we'd call some of the dolmens or portal things that have these colossal rocks that weigh tons and tons and tons and tons. It's kind of going off piece a little, but from a later period, I would have particular interest in prehistoric Bronze Age gold jewelry.
Okay.
And I was lucky enough to see a metalsmith from the South, Brian Clark, make objects, and people really marvel at the skill that people had then. So we shouldn't underestimate the skill. And some of the objects that we have on display from the Bronze Age, they're like little gold lockets, but the gold wire is so small that where the front and back joins, it's almost impossible to count with the naked eye. And although people can't see us on the radio, we see we're both wearing glasses, and you'd wonder, how did people really do this without the modern aid of magnifying glasses? And it's kind of a roundabout way of saying, that these people were highly skilled, and we have lost a lot of these skills. And today we would probably, as I say, we need our JCBs and our machinery to move these stones about. But they obviously thought it was worth their while to do so by the sweat of their own brow and the sweat of others. I suppose just maybe sort of rounding off of it, I didn't sort of really mention about what is the main burial rite that we find in court tombs. And the main burial rite is cremation. And also in some of the courts, we would have found evidence for animal bones. So some of the suggestions is that there might have been, in the good old tradition, maybe of an Irish wake, there was a bit of a feast and ceremony going on the court, including probably cremating the body, and then taking the cremated ashes and burying them in the chambers. The number of individuals in these tombs can vary from just a few, maybe up to maybe as many as 30. Some of the chambers, even though they appear not to be disturbed, don't appear to have. Some chambers in some of the court tombs have no burials at all.
Really?
So I think it's important that these probably acted as well as really focal points and markers in the community, and may even as meeting places. We were joking the other day, I could say, Ger, I'll meet you at such and such a place, I'll meet you at a restaurant, meet you at a pub, meet you at 12 o'clock. How on earth did any people tell the time in the past? How did they know when to meet? How did they know where to meet? So maybe these... there was maybe just simply more to these monuments than simply thinking of them as a place that we simply buried our dead.
I'm not going to keep you much longer, and I appreciate you giving me so much time, but two questions I want to ask you. And regular listeners will know that I love history, and I love talking to people about museums and old art and things like that. So I'm going to ask the question that I always ask. Being in the presence of 6,000-year-old building blocks, as we'll call them, what goes through your mind?
I really suppose I touched upon it. If you're talking about the tombs, I touched upon it really early. Is the whole concept of the effort these people took to bury their dead and to provide for the afterlife. And I suppose if we think of, there's a whole debate in museums in the minute around the display of human remains, and that's a kind of another story. But a lot of archaeology is about the display of human remains and how people treated the dead in the past. If you think back just a few years ago during the old COVID pandemic, that people couldn't attend funerals. So to me, it's thinking just what must life have been like? Must it have been really, really hard? Just finish up with a little story is. We mentioned in the Neolithic, I mentioned the Mesolithic, which is the period before Neolithic Ireland. Very, very little evidence of how the people buried their dead here. Maybe just a few little cremations because they weren't making big markers. Mm-hmm. But there's a lovely burial, the Vedbeck burial, and I think it's in Denmark. I hope it's in Denmark, and it's a Mesolithic burial where a little child is laid out buried on a swan's wing. And it's kind of a really, really kind of, to me, it's a kind of a touch, it's kind of a touching image. And I suppose you just think, what was life like? Was it a struggle? Provide for food. When you look at some of the studies of all the diseases that these people people suffered from, from toothache to arthritis to God knows what. What was life like?
Of course, they all did. They all died young anyway. I mean, to get to 30 or 35 was a grand old age, wasn't it?
It would have been a grand.
Listen, final question for you: can we see anything of this online anywhere?
Yes, you should be able to. I should have, of course, checked. Our website would be National Museums NI, www.nationalmuseums.ni, and when you go onto that site, you can look at the museum from the National Museums NI is it can confuse people in the sense that also includes the Ulster Museum, includes the Folk Museum, the Transport Museum, and the Ulster American Folk Park. But by going onto that site, you should be able to navigate to the Folk Museum or type in Ballintaggart.
All righty. It's a fascinating conversation. I really do appreciate you taking time to talk to us about the tombs that were found and now have their new home, their permanent home at the Folk Museum in Northern Ireland. Dr. Ger Ramsay, Curator of Archaeology at the National Museums Northern Ireland. Thanks a million for talking to us and good luck in the future.
Thank you.
I've been stepping on a razor's edge, living life but playing dead. Fighting demons in my head, and everything I do leads back to you. It's always you. It's always you. And I just want to take time, find a little peace of mind, maybe even draw a line to see if I get over. My mind. my mind to you. You're building walls that I can't climb, and I don't know just what it is I say. Never mind that I can't find a single way to open up my mind to you. You're building walls that I can't climb, and I don't know just what it is I say to you. Never mind that I can't find a single way to open up my mind to you. Building walls that I can't climb, and I don't know just what it is I say to you. I'm breaking down but holding out, drowning in a sea of doubt. Too many sands, too many faces, too many walls, too many places.
Nice. I like that. It was released last Friday. It comes from Americ. That's who it is. And he's got Wilfie from Northern Ireland in there. And a song called Nevermind. And delighted to get a copy of that last week, and delighted to be able to give it a spin for you this evening. So there you have it. Can I say thank you very much to Gary? Thanks, Gary. He just sent 3 words. Good show, Ger. Thanks very much. Appreciate that, and glad to have your company this evening as well. So thanks very much. No, that's 3 times I've said thanks very much. That's all right. Thanks very much. Right, excuse me. Part of Dublin's original seawall, we're back to history, which is almost 300 years old, and a number of other artefacts, including dock workers' pipes displaying political and trade union branding, went on display in a newly restored Victorian electricity substation at Dublin Port. Dublin Port is 300 hectares in size, but this will be the first building on the estate which is open to the public to visit. That's magic. The brickwork from the 1720s was uncovered during the restoration of the substation, which lies at the entrance to the port on Alexandra Road in Dublin. A glass bottom floor allows people to walk over the 18th century wall, from which the nearby East Wall got its name. The building had been slotted for demolition in 2016, but Dublin Port applied for it to be made a protected structure and spent €3 million restoring, renovating and extending the small rectangular building, which is now one of the smallest museums in Dublin. James Kelleher, head of special projects at Dublin Port, said that the building had become unstable due to the volume of traffic from trucks that rumbled past its entrance every day. And because it was built over a former seawall, saying that the building had essentially been defying gravity. He said it was about to fall down in 2017. There was a massive structural crack in its side wall. The reason for that, we found out, was the old east wall, the 300-year-old wall that was discovered was running right below it, creating a fault line within the building itself. The building was leaning by a couple of inches literally to the east. So it had to be held up first, and it was defying gravity, as he said. And then when the new works began, its internal structure skeleton was installed. Excavate the old wall and then come up with a meaningful design that displayed the historic wall in an effective way. However, the seawall was not the only treasure that was unearthed during the restoration project. Clay pipes from the 19th century, which would have been smoked by dock workers and have logos declaring allegiances to Charles Stewart Parnell, Republican movement and trade unions, were also discovered. They're thought to be some of the earliest examples of political merchandise in Ireland. Martha Lopez of the Dublin Port Archive said that the pipes tell the story of the ordinary worker of the Docklands. They're significant for social history. The people who work at the docks, their names might not have been in documents and newspapers, so these are traces of their day-to-day life, she said. One of the pipes has Parnell, leader of the Home Rule movement. The badges are on the side. Normally they're in the middle, so they're almost concealed, so they can decide when to show their political affiliation or not. It'll be used for small-scale events such as lectures, poetry reading and theatre performances, and it is hoped to bring a new cultural amenity to the East Wall area of North Dublin. That's a nice one. I like that. I did make contact to see if we could get somebody to have a chat with us about that. I haven't heard back from them as yet, but I'm hoping to in the next wee while. And if they do come back to me, I will absolutely, definitely, 100% have them on the programme very soon. This will be the final track on the programme. I think we'll have time for a few more bits of news before I go. Maybe not, though. Here's a track I've played before, and it was hugely welcomed and warmly received from Greenshine, Don't Mind If I Do.
Don't mind if I do. I'll tag along with you. I don't know where you've been. Don't know where you're going. I'll go there too. Come, sit and talk to me. Tell me what it is you see. Come, tell me all your tricks. Soon you'll be knowing the deal with me. Pulling up a chair right next to me in the dim blue light of the mute TV. See your eyes light up as I make you laugh. I'm happy. Death and downers everywhere. I must come up for air. Throw me the lifeline of your smile. Your laugh's a light in a sea of care. Pulling up a chair right next to me in the dim blue light of the mute TV. See your eyes light up as I make you laugh. I'm happy, trust you in the way I can trust no other, and nobody can trust me. And just before you ask, I'm equal to the task. 'Cause it's worth sorting through your stuff. The evidence in your green eye is proof enough. Pulling up a chair right next to me in the dim blue light of the mute TV. See your eyes light up as I make you laugh. And I'm happy.
That's Greenshine and a song called Don't Mind If I Do. PJ Curtis was in contact PJ is in the heart of the beautiful Burren in County Clare at the moment. The weather isn't great, but he said there's a court tomb just up the road from him there. I must have a look at that without falling down and breaking my neck like I did the last time nearly. The last time I was in the Burren. Alrighty, that's it. Done and dusted. PJ, thanks for tuning our way this evening. Good to have your company as always, and I hope we find you well, and I'll touch base in the next couple of days. I have to talk to Antonio Sierra as well. Thanks, Antonio, our Spanish-Irish cultural advisor on the programme, always working diligently to promote life on Eire. Thanks to Pat Foodie for talking to us in the first hour about tyre safety, and thanks to Dr. Greer Ramsey, the Curator of Archaeology at the National Museums Northern Ireland. Thank you for your patience and for tuning in this evening. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you didn't, tell someone you were gone to the pictures, will you, or something like that. See you next Wednesday, hopefully, at the same time. From me, Ger Sweeney, look after yourselves. BBC on the way.
Ger Sweeney presents Live on Eire in association with emeraldconnection.net.
You've been listening to a TRE production. If you've enjoyed this programme, there'll be another episode waiting for you next week, right here on this platform, where you can also access our extensive back catalogue of shows and interviews. For more information on our live programming, social media channels and apps, and how to contact Talk Radio Europe, please visit tre.radio.